You notice it in an empty room. The floor is quiet, except for your own steps. A half-open door hangs in the hallway. A chair sits in the corner like someone just left. You check your phone, then check the doorway again, as if a familiar face might appear if you look long enough. Nothing happens, and the room feels larger. The obvious explanation is simple. This is just not wanting to be alone. But if that were the whole answer, a closed door and a lit room would make it disappear. Instead, the body reacts as if distance from familiar people is still a real risk. That is why empty room unease can feel larger than the room itself. Safety felt borrowed from others. This does not feel like a modern preference. It feels older, stranger, and harder to explain away. Why should a quiet room, a dark hallway, and no familiar person nearby make your chest tighten at all? What old pressure made distance feel unsafe, and why does it still reach you now? For ancient humans, distance from the group could mean trouble before trouble even showed itself. In small band living, a person alone had fewer eyes on the ground, fewer voices to warn, fewer hands to help. A narrow path through open ground was not just a path. It was a place where danger could come from the side, and no one could cover every direction at once. Picture a tight cluster of bodies near a shelter wall. One person faces outward while others rest. Another passes food into waiting hands. Breath, movement, and attention stay close together because the group itself is part of the protection. Leave that cluster, and you lose more than company. You lose backup, warning, and the small margin that lets sleep happen at all. The record of human life keeps pointing back to this basic fact. Being apart could make a body easier to miss, easier to surprise, easier to leave behind. The survival problem was simple and hard at the same time. How close did you need to stay so the group could still catch what came next? That pressure did not arrive once. It returned with night, with travel, with hunger, with the long stretch of waiting when no one could afford to relax. A body that failed to notice closeness at the right moment could miss a warning. A mind that treated distance as harmless could wake too late, or rest too soon, or step away from the only people who could still help. So the body and mind had to keep score. Who is near? Who is watching? Who can answer if something changes? Those questions did not need language to matter. They could live in posture, in the glance toward a doorway, in the quick relief that comes when a familiar figure enters the edge of sight. That is the shape of the pressure behind the feeling. And once a pressure keeps returning through cold ground, open paths, and thin shelter walls, it does not stay outside the body. It leaves a residue. It makes distance feel heavier than distance should feel. It makes protection seem fragile even when the room is quiet and nothing is wrong. That is the hidden cost inside the unease, the part we still carry without naming it. The question is no longer whether the pressure was real, but what ancient humans had to do with it before it became a cost we still carry. Ancient humans did not solve that pressure by becoming independent. They solved it by staying close enough to be seen, heard, and answered. Around a shelter edge, a child stayed near an adult's knee while another person watched the open side of the camp. Archaeological traces from Catalhoyuk are one safe reminder that humans often lived in tight proximity, where other bodies were part of the day's protection. In that setting, the sound of breathing inside a cluster meant more than noise. It meant company, warning, and the chance that someone would notice trouble first. The cost here was isolation exposure. The farther a person drifted from the cluster, the more they lost the shared eyes and shared hands that made the ground feel usable. This was not comfort for its own sake. It was a way to keep the day from turning dangerous. But what kind of habit grows when safety keeps arriving through other people? The answer was simple in form and demanding in practice. People moved together, paused together, and carried food in shared hands so no one had to cross open ground alone. One person stepped, then checked for the others. Another matched pace, keeping the line together as the group moved between a resting place and the next task. This is where it stops looking simple. Shared vigilance only worked if bodies stayed readable to one another. A glance, a shift in posture, a voice from nearby could change what the next movement meant. Even rest was collective. If one person slept, another stayed near enough to notice the edge of things. The cost here was social coordination. Every move had to fit the group's rhythm, because separation could break the warning system that kept everyone covered. That is why the feeling mattered in lived human terms. But what did that kind of living demand from the mind when space opened between people? That pattern mattered because it let small groups survive nights, travel, and food sharing without asking any single body to hold all the risk. It shows ancient humans as creatures built for mutual presence, not lone endurance. A person near others could rest with less strain on attention. A person away from others had to face more uncertainty at once. The record of human life does not need grand theory to show this. It only needs ordinary scenes. A face turned toward the group, hands passing food, a body waiting at the edge before stepping out. The cost here was separation residue. Once closeness became the place where safety lived, the mind could keep treating distance as unfinished business. The empty space after others left could feel wrong because, for so long, absence had been tied to exposure. Safety felt borrowed from others, and that borrowed feeling left a mark. What did that mark teach the body to notice first, even when the world changed around it? Now that same logic appears in a bright apartment after friends leave. A person sits on the edge of the couch. The refrigerator hums. An untouched room opens around them. They keep drifting toward the doorway, as if the rest of the group might come back through it. The place is safe, but the feeling is not. Familiar absence can feel like exposed ground, and that is the hidden cost. The body still treats separation from protection as a warning signal. Small group dependence made closeness useful, because distance once meant fewer eyes, fewer answers, fewer hands. The old rule was built for that kind of life, so it lingers in quiet rooms, late nights, and any moment when no familiar face is near. This is the trade carried forward. Safety felt borrowed from others. And once safety feels borrowed, a silent apartment can start to feel less like a home and more like a pause before something returns. What does that reveal about the human inside the room? It reveals that the modern sensation is older than the apartment wall. The mind is not inventing danger from nothing. It is following an ancestral pressure that once mattered for real survival. In a small band, distance from familiar people changed what the night meant. A person alone had to notice more, trust less, and wait longer for help. That pressure left a residue of group dependence. So today, when a chair sits empty and a hallway goes dark, the body can still react as if the room has lost part of its cover. The sensation is ordinary, but the logic behind it is not. It is a body reading present-day quiet through an older rule of protection. That is why the feeling can seem to arrive before thought, before language, before the person can explain it. The room has changed. The reaction has not fully forgotten the older world. And now the tension sharpens. If the same feeling can live inside comfort, what else does it still carry with it? It carries the same small jolt that appeared in the opening. The glance at the doorway, the pause at the edge of the room, the phone left face down on the table, doing nothing to settle the chest. The mystery is no longer that the feeling exists. The mystery is why it keeps showing up when no one is missing in any practical sense. Safety felt borrowed from others, and that is the answer. The hard part is not that the reaction survived. The hard part is that ordinary privacy still has to pass through a survival rule written for a world where separation could mean vulnerability. That is the hidden cost of human social life. Not despair, not weakness, just a mind and body built to notice when the group is gone. If this changes how you hear a quiet room, the next story follows sleep vulnerability and the old cost of closing your eyes.